All right, welcome everybody, and welcome to the Washington Hospitality Association podcast. I'm Lex Nepomuceno. I'm joined by Lisa Lineberger and Josh Kopel, who is. You seem like to do many things, Josh, but regardless, you have a lot of experience in the hospitality industry, and we're always looking for creative ideas, especially during these difficult times. And I know we have operators who will be listening in on this as well as the replays of this. So we thought it would be a good idea to have you as a guest and talk about some of the innovative things that you've seen all across the United States, if not the world. So, Josh, why don't we go ahead and get started, and let's have you just talk a little bit about you.
Right on. So to start, I guess the headline is I'm a Michelin-rated restaurateur. I owned and operated prior to the pandemic 3 locations in Los Angeles. I had a dive bar in Hollywood. I had a Michelin-rated restaurant in downtown Los Angeles. And we opened a fast casual concept called South City Fried Chicken. So I have existed within all 3 principal tiers of dining for the last decade.
Great. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the things that you've seen? I mean, it's been a very this particular show is about pandemic pivots, and that was one of the topics that you had shown some interest in. And what are some of the more creative things that you've seen in the industry that folks up here in Washington State might be able to apply to their restaurants and even lodging establishments?
Absolutely. So to start, I'd like to provide some context, which was when my restaurant closed in March of last year, I wanted to know why, because it felt like it was somewhat pandemic related, but my own personal experience was, especially with the fine dining restaurant, we were top lining $3.4 million a year and still struggling for money every day, every week, every month. And I didn't get into this industry to be a bookkeeper. So when we closed the restaurant, which was right around the time of the statewide mandates, I had more than enough time to explore this question. And I wanted to explore it with the people that I had idolized and looked up to my entire career, who at the time were unemployed as well. I reached out to guys like John Taffer and Andrew Zimmern and Will Guidara. And I was like, what have you done right to get where you are? And do you have the same financial concerns that I do? And what are the great decisions you've made in the past, and what are you doing now, and what does the future look like? And so I've had countless conversations over the last 10 months revolving around that. And the only reason I bring that up is because what I'm about to share aren't my own experiences. I'm not a guru, but I've just talked to the brightest minds in our industry, and I know what they're doing and what's working for them. And that was the goal in sharing. So, I guess to start broadly, multiple revenue streams. When I started my restaurant, I didn't have a 1-page business plan. I had a 1-line business plan, which was, we're going to open the restaurant, people are going to come in, they're going to eat, and hopefully they come back and tell other people. And that was it. And so many of us start restaurants with that as the intention. But there is a better way to do business. And that way is to secure our income through multiple revenue streams. You're seeing it now. Some people are pivoting into this. Some people have been doing it from the beginning. But most restaurants have access to farmers market goods and services from local providers that regular consumers simply don't have access to. Putting those together in a crate requires almost no labor, and you're able to charge a premium for collecting those resources and selling them. Merchandise. T-shirts, sweatshirts, and hats. There are companies out there that you can form a strategic partnership with so that you don't even have to create the merch. They'll simply superimpose your logo onto their goods, and the products won't be created until the order has been placed. You're able to do all of that through your website. You're seeing people bag, box, and bottle their secret sauces and spice blends and sell that to their consumers as well.
I know that there was one business up here in Washington State. I think it's Lisa. You might remember I think it was Heritage Distillery, and they are a distillery, and they do things like scotch and vodka and all those types of things. And then they started manufacturing hand sanitizing products.
Right.
Dry Fly.
Yeah. Oh, Dry Fly. Yeah. And it was amazing. It turned out to be a bestseller. You can go to Costco now and pick up some. And so stuff like that. But from a restaurateur's perspective, let's say, products like apparel and those types of things aren't their niche. They like to prepare food. What are some of the food-oriented things, whether it's diversification of their delivery or pickup operations, whether it's ghost kitchens? What are some of the things along those lines that you've seen work successfully in the industry?
So there are high ticket items that work almost universally across brands. Par cooked food is definitely one of them. It's not that people want to pick up a fully prepared meal. It's that they want to get a pan of something that's almost done, and then they take it home, they drop it in the oven, and they have a fresh pseudo home cooked meal for their family of four, and they're willing to pay a premium for it. I would also say that the people that have really jumped into takeout and delivery with both feet have done incredibly well. What does that mean? That means you're not throwing your dine-in food in a box and pushing it out the door, but you've actually thoughtfully worked to create a menu that travels well, is at an accessible price point, that the margin is inclusive of the packaging fees and the delivery fees. And you're actually able to make money off of it. Other pivots that I've seen do incredibly well. Increasing pricing. It's a conversation that as restaurateurs, we've been scared to have for a really, really long time. But this is the moment. Restaurateurs have never been open-minded, and customers have never been more pliable. So now's the time to message to your customers and say, this food costs 20% more, here's why. We have the ability in this moment to reset the rules of engagement. Speaking high level, broadly, we've gotten into the bad habit in this industry of hiding the effort that goes into an effortless experience. And through social media and through the pandemic, it's been revealed that our jobs are really hard and the margins are really low. And no matter how beautiful your restaurant is, most of us aren't millionaires living these lavish lives. Most of us are working 80 to 100 hours a week. And most of us are living on razor thin margins that enable us to pay our rent, but maybe not our mortgage. Now is the time to have that conversation and to say, I want to be able to put some money in my pocket. I want to be able to offer 401ks. I want to be able to offer subsidized healthcare. And in exchange, I'm going to need you to pay more.
Yeah. I think, there's a lot of chefs and a lot of restaurants who've diversified their business in terms of offering cooking classes and offering kind of on-site dining experiences when they go, almost like a quasi catering business where they go out to the facility and they'll cook for you, they'll prepare for you. There's a lot of those things. One of the challenges, especially full service restaurants have, is they have a really large, as you know, footprint and real estate that they have to pay for. Hopefully during these times, they've had a good relationship with their landlords, so they've been able to negotiate something to keep them intact. But it doesn't change the fact that after the pandemic is over or during the pandemic, they still have a fairly large rent that they have to pay there. In these times where you really have finite space of availability, like in Washington State, we're now at 25% pretty much statewide. In California, I think it's hit or miss there, right? Some states it's close to 100%. So with that moving target, I guess going from a 25% target like we have in Washington State, how can restaurants best maximize the real estate that they're paying for right now? They're pretty much on the hook for often multi-year contracts.
Great question. I think that if we're paying rent 24 hours a day, we need to be generating revenue 24 hours a day. And the best way you can do that with your licensed and permitted kitchen is to give Cloud Concepts an opportunity to run their operation through your real estate during the times that you aren't actively operating. I think what we've seen broadly with most restaurateurs that are doing well in this moment is a streamlining of operations, right? Not everybody feels the need to run 7 days a week anymore. A lot of operations are running 5 days a week. Not everybody's running breakfast, lunch, and dinner service. So during those times that you're not monetizing the real estate, you have the opportunity to lease that out or license out that space to other people that are happy to use it to prep and execute their menus as well. I would also say, and I know that there are people that fall on both sides of this conversation, but I was running the fine dining restaurant that we had was 6,000 square feet across 2 floors. And the question that I asked myself once we started looking at multiple revenue streams was, can I make the same amount of money at a 3,000 square feet? And I think that there's a lot of truth to that. I think if we're doing more takeout and delivery business, if we're doing more, not necessarily catering, but large format offerings that are going straight out the door, do we need as much real estate as we needed before? What does the nature of dine-in look like? And if we ask ourselves those questions, what we discover really quickly is that, sure, we've all been screwed for the last 10 months, but landlords are slowly but surely beginning to realize they're screwed too. We're all in the same sinking ship. And the only way we're going to get out is if everybody grabs a bucket. So a 6,000 square foot location in a prime area with tons of walk-through traffic is worth a whole lot less today than it was 10 months ago. And if we view it through that lens, we can work with our landlord as a strategic partner to create a new agreement. And if they're not interested in it, then there are opportunities to start fresh in second generation locations, which have barely been touched and are going to be at a far more accessible price point.
Yeah, and I think right now, often, as business owners, we get locked into our original buy-in, right?
Absolutely.
And so it's difficult to let go. And the thing that restaurateurs especially need to remember right now, hoteliers are a little bit more difficult because there are often big buildings involved. But for restaurateurs, and you're leasing 5,000 square feet, 1,000 square feet, doesn't matter. There's more flexibility now, thank you to various government assistance, mandates, and laws out there to protect our industry that have happened over the past several months. And so, eviction moratoriums, things like that. There's leverage that you could go back and renegotiate with your landlord and say, hey, we're, like you said, we're in the same boat. Can we do something where, we could get a little bit of a rent break for the next 6 months or so, or something else? I think that people
rethink it entirely, right? Like, what if we rethink it entirely with the landlord and say, listen, I paid my rent on time every month for X amount of years. I don't want to do that anymore if I'm not making money. So the way it's going to work is I'll pay a lower base rent, and then I'll give you a percentage of sales. And that way, if I'm winning, you're winning. And if not, nobody does well. There was at least in Los Angeles County, there was a real estate shortage prior to the pandemic. So landlords were able to ask exorbitant rates and charge those rates. I mean, personally, and I was happy to sign the lease when I did almost a decade ago. But like my rent at Pru and Proper was $21,000 a month. Wow. That doesn't give you a lot of flexibility as an owner or an operator, because you've got to generate at least $2.4 million a year to be able to cover that nut. And that's not even about making money, right? Like, that's about breaking even. So the first year when we generated $1.2 million, we took epic losses, and I still paid my rent every month. And that's not sustainable moving forward. One of the things that I would encourage everyone, and it's because we're entrepreneurial in nature and because we're service oriented, but all entrepreneurs are optimistic. Restaurateurs exist with a level of optimism that borders on insanity, myself included. But if I was a little more realistic, a little more pessimistic, and a little less optimistic, I would have negotiated a much better rate. And so we are in the situation that we are in this moment, but hopefully we don't behave in the same way moving forward. Hopefully we are far more aggressive in the way we negotiate with commercial landlords, that we make sure that it's a deal where when we win, they win, and not the other way around.
Creative ideas on indoor-outdoor space. One of the things you don't have this problem as much in California as we do up here in Washington State, is that the weather is a little bit more temperamental up here, especially now with the snow, versus California, where indoor-outdoor space works a little bit better from a year-round perspective. What are some of the really effective things that you've seen in leveraging indoor-outdoor dining from a year-round perspective that you've seen in other markets?
Great question. So I would argue the point that if you think creatively, there is more indoor dining space than there has ever been in the history of our industry, because people are eating at home. And so if you expand the concept of your dining room to other people's homes, then it's just about creating a package that compels them to eat your food in their dining room. And then you're not hamstrung. And it goes back to something you mentioned before, which is virtual experiences. It's again to be able to sit down, and it doesn't need to be just a cooking class, because people want to learn. They've had more time, and they understand that the operations of a restaurant are a very thoughtful process. So even if it was that you're selling a par cooked meal for 4 with a couple of bottles of wine, right? And then instead of like a cooking class, it's a sommelier that walks people through a pairing. That will get people to buy your food over someone else's. If it's simply the chef, as you're eating the food, walking you through the inspiration for the recipes, where they came from, the sourcing of the individual ingredients, all of these things are an incredibly light lift. And not only will it help increase sales, but it'll create that personal human connection. Restaurateurs that are doing it and doing it well know one thing and one thing alone. Nobody's giving money to your restaurant. They're giving money to you. They invest in you because you invest in your community. So putting your team out front has a huge impact.
Well, that's the first time I've really heard it like that, the dining experience extends beyond your indoor-outdoor space. It extends to people's homes. And that's very insightful, Josh. I love that example, because that forces the whole industry to think in those terms. I come from the quick service background, where I had a number of pizza restaurants, and we were focused on delivery. And so we knew that the impression of our customers when they received our box of pizza was important. So we put the extra care into the presentation of that, because our niche was gourmet pizzas delivered, right? Well, oftentimes I see with full service operators in particular, when they handle their takeout business, it's almost like an afterthought. Oh, let's just put it in there, especially the fast casual segment, right? The teriyaki places. It's like they don't care about the presentation. They just put a bunch of food in the box and they deliver it. And that's a real great opportunity, especially for fast casual, to expand their market presence, right?
Well, and that would be my whole point. So we'll use Pru and Proper as a great example. So we spent almost $2 million building out that restaurant, which means I didn't give a crap what our takeout and delivery stuff looked like. The whole experience was in the restaurant. But here's the opportunity that's presented to all of us to get world-class takeout and to-go materials made that are custom, that are on brand. It's way less than $2 million, right? So you're able to provide an experience at a much lower cost when you think about the big picture on this thing. And again, and I said this at the beginning, the people that have done incredibly well in the takeout and delivery space are the people that jumped in with both feet, that didn't see it as an afterthought and really worked to create a menu and an offering, both from the practical and the visual standpoint, that represents their brand. Because you can look at this as a decline in business, or what you can say is this has been an evolution in the way that people consume restaurant food, which it is. For what it's worth, takeout and delivery is now 80% of business, but when it drops down, it won't become 5 to 10% of the business anymore. It's going to hover in that 20 to 30% range. So how are you going to view that as a legitimate revenue stream, and how are you going to capitalize on that?
Pivot a little bit here. One of the things that we mentioned in the headline of this presentation was, what are some of the things that haven't worked? And I think one of the helpful things about talking with someone with your experience and why I, as a restaurateur in Washington State, would want to be listening to this is I want to learn from some of the errors, right? So it saves me money and time. What are some of the biggest fails that you've seen in the industry that they've tried to do, and it may have been a good effort, but it just, for whatever reason, it just doesn't work?
So the biggest fail actually started just prior to the pandemic, which was people weren't collecting their customers' information. You just took for granted, like busy restaurants took for granted that they were going to always be busy, and they didn't own their customers, whether it was allowing third-party delivery to own that information without you ever making an effort to garner it. Nobody was working towards email addresses and cell phone numbers so that they could communicate directly with their market. And those people really struggled because The whole point of that one-to-one communication, or on social media, the one-to-many communication, is the ability to be able to tell your customer what you need in order to be able to stay in business, and that they can tell you what they want from you in this moment. And the places that have really suffered have been the ones that lived in a bubble, that had no audience, that had no access to their customer. They didn't even really know who their customer was, and they were just serving people blindly. I would say another pivot that we've seen that didn't work out incredibly well is portion relative to pricing. As it turns out, cheaper is not necessarily better. And what you saw a lot of full service restaurants cut the portions in half, slap it in a box, and sell it for less. And it was just an uninspiring offering. When people order from restaurants, what they want is they want that intentional experience, an underlying experience there. So if it's in a greasy cardboard box with fingerprints on it, that's not an experience that anyone wants to replicate. So there were so many full service restaurants that pivoted into takeout and delivery, made a half-hearted effort, and then saw sales dry up almost instantaneously.
You said one of the things that really got my attention, especially, is growing your email list. There was a, in just businesses outside of maybe hospitality. Let's say if you have a digital marketing agency, or you're an online store or something like that, a big part of your success is the size of your email list.
Sure.
And so, in fact, there's some numbers that I've heard that, for every, for every one, depending on your market, for every one name on your email address, it's worth $100 over the course of a year, hence $100,000 in revenue just for selling a book or whatever. Restaurants, I would say it could be even more than that. If it's
absolutely.
If it's your 1,000 most popular customers, it's going to be worth way more than $100 a year. And so, talk a little bit more into what restaurants can do to better embrace building their email list. If they've been in business for 15 years, and this is one of those things. It's like, darn it, I wish I would have a list 10,000 strong by now.
Yeah, absolutely, you would.
So if they're late to the party, what would you say to them?
So first, I would say that you always have to lead with value. So Gary Vaynerchuk, a very famous social media personality, said that every company is a media company, whether they realize it or not. And there's a bunch of truth to that. So when we look at social media is an opportunity to build rapport through documenting. You should show people who works in the restaurant, how the restaurant operates. People that are invested in your food are invested in you as well. And don't discount that. Then it becomes about providing legitimate value. Through social media, you create lead magnets where you say, hey, we know that our key lime pie is one of the favorites on the menu. Go to this landing page on the website, drop in your email address, and we'll send you a copy of that recipe. Now, that gets them into an email funnel where they're part of your monthly newsletter that isn't about selling. It's about providing value. Hey guys, here are 4 tips from Chef Billy on how to do this. And this is how Chef Billy makes sausage. And here are 4 best practices, because you teach what you know, and know that people are interested in that. If every chef got onto their restaurant's Instagram page and said, hey, I'm going to teach everyone the basics of knife cuts. So sign up here. It's going to be a Zoom webinar. It's going to last 20 minutes. And I'm going to teach you the basics of being a prep cook. Everybody would be into that because everybody's interested in learning. There isn't a like an automotive repair channel, but there's the Food Network. People are incredibly interested in food service, food preparation, the consumption of food, the variety of food out there, the way people source. These are all great topics to talk about. And if you broadly talk about it on your social media and then send people to sign up forms on your website, they'll do it. And then it's just about providing value through that regular communication. If you're not selling, if you're just sharing, and you do it on a monthly basis, you don't have to ask people to patronize your restaurant. They'll do it because they want to do it.
That's really apt because I think that, there's so many restaurants I personally go to just because I like to support them. Plus, I love eating in restaurants, right? Take my family there. But I would say 9 out of 10 of them, I don't get an email from
Sure.
maybe more than twice a year. Maybe they'll send me one for Valentine's Day because I was there in the Valentine's Day before. What restaurants need to do is, in order to build an effective email list, you should be contacting them minimum once a month, most likely once a week. And it's
Absolutely.
basically just your your ongoing narrative, your life as a high-end chef of a restaurant or a chain or something like that. People love those types of stories, and this could also yield into creating your own YouTube channel and building up your social media brand. So, and that brings us to social media. What are some of the most creative things that you've seen that have also been very effective that restaurants have done in social media over the past 9 months?
I think my two favorite things are that I have seen restaurant owners and operators interviewing their staff on IG Live, which has been so cool. Hey, how has your pandemic experience been? What do you love about working at this restaurant? What are your goals and aspirations for your life? Again, like, people support people, people don't support businesses. So putting themselves out there front and center. Generally seeing how restaurateurs have come out front to document their lives has been so inspirational because, again, there's so much effort that goes into the effortless experience that is a restaurant that people want to see it. And, my restaurant opened at 5 o'clock in the evening. So I'm sure people thought we got to work at 4:30, right? And we had guys in the kitchen at 8 o'clock in the morning, every single morning. And so showing them that has been so inspirational because, one restaurateur to another, you feel a lot less alone knowing that everyone's kind of in the same boat. And then it also gives our patrons, one, a window into our lives, and two, a new appreciation for what we're doing. I would say the other thing are the virtual classes, the education that people are presenting. And again, a lot of people aren't. You look at Death & Co., I think is a great example. And everyone should check out what they do on social media, because rather than building an email list, they communicate with everyone through their social media platform. But on their Instagram, they're throwing out cocktail demos and recipes and highlighting bartenders across the country and using their business as a window into the industry at large, the cocktail culture at large. And they've done a great job with that. And if you can become the megaphone for your cuisine, if you become the megaphone for your community through the lens of your restaurant, it's a great opportunity. And again, there are so many people out there doing it well.
Yeah, and in a way, they could actually be the trade convention bureau of their region.
Absolutely.
They could be restaurants who are amazing ambassadors for their territories, because oftentimes I'll go someplace just because there's a restaurant I want to go to there. And
Right.
as restaurateurs, they forget about that sometimes, right? And so this is a great way to, be a spokesperson for your community, help stimulate that community, because if people are going to go to your restaurant and they want to try your unique dishes, and this is the only place in Washington State that they can do it, well, odds are they'll probably hang out there and they might have coffee at the coffee shop. They might buy a souvenir, or they might stay overnight at a hotel. So there's a lot of ripple effects that restaurants can bring into their communities.
Absolutely. And just to give people a couple of examples of people doing it well, Death & Co. does a great job from the cocktail perspective, from a community perspective. Johnny Raizone and Helen Ray's in Los Angeles do a great job on social media of engaging their audience. And then Jet Tila, who currently does not work out of a commercial kitchen. For Thanksgiving, he showed people like how to dress a turkey, right? And so you can get super seasonal. It's, our specialty is food. And if you become a trusted resource for food or beverage in your community, then obviously there's going to be an ancillary uptick in business.
Yeah, that's true. Now, for the last segment here, I wanted to talk about what's next. What do you see around the corner as regions are starting to get back online? They're allowing more people in hospitality establishments. What do you see in the next 3 to 6 months for our industry?
So here are my hopes. One, I hope the prices go up. I hope that they go way up. I hope that restaurateurs have the courage to have the conversation. If we've seen anything over the course of the last 10 months, it's that patrons care a lot less than we thought for the things that we care a lot about. And so for us to turn to our patrons and again, reverse engineer it and say, I want to offer subsidized healthcare. I want to offer a 401k. I want to make sure that I'm able to put money in my own pocket at the end of the day and adjust pricing and then share that narrative on social media with people. I think they'll be amazed at the support they get. So pricing is huge. 2, I think multiple revenue streams are here to stay. I think the retail elements, whether we're talking about merchandising or sauces or farmers market boxes, I think they're here to stay. I think large format is here to stay as well. I think the par cooked meals are an amazing opportunity for all of us that aren't interested in catering to dip our toe in the water. Cocktails to go. I don't think this is going anywhere. And I think it creates a super exciting revenue stream in both the individual cocktails and large format. And then lastly, I'll say that I think that what we're going to see is a more holistic revenue stream for restaurants in general, where dine-in will no longer consist of 80% or 90% of our revenue. It'll drop down to 60%. And we'll be able to fill that out at a better margin with our takeout and delivery options, our large format options, and our retail.
That's great, because I think that one of the things I've seen is we've seen up here in Washington, especially where we've had restaurants who, because they've had to expand their outdoor space, you can already see it's going to be a permanent part of their business moving forward. All of a sudden, yes, it's been a struggle this past year, but starting in January or starting in June and summer, all of a sudden they'll have maybe sometimes 25% more space that they wouldn't have had otherwise.
For sure.
That's hopefully we could take advantage of that. Josh, you've been great, and this is going to be on our podcast, and I'm sure that I'm going to get member questions about this, and hopefully we can have you back and talking about a different topic, because I know that you're very passionate about the hospitality industry and you have a lot of background in it. But Josh, if people wanted to learn more about you and get a hold of you, how would they do that?
They can go to joshkopel.com, joshkopel.com.
Great. And Josh, thank you very much. Lisa, do we have any questions that came in that Josh can answer before we close out here?
Not this time, no.
All right. Okay, Josh, any final thoughts?
There's a gold rush coming, guys. At the end of the day, what you're looking at is you're looking at 100% demand with only 40 to 50% of the restaurants nationally to facilitate that demand. So when it comes, we all need to make sure we're ready.
Great. Great words. Thank you very much, Josh. And until next time, have a great week.
Thank you. Great chatting.